You're listening to the Health and Happiness Podcast with Travis Kemper and
Lauren Maxwell. Each episode, we share easy-to-implement strategies to improve your health, happiness, and overall quality of life. The best 6 doctors anywhere, and no one can deny it, are sunshine, water, rest, air, exercise, and diet. Wayne Fields. How's it going, Travis?
Oh, it's going well. As you know, and people may hear soon, I have Duke alone with me right now. So I'm currently bribing him with a peanut butter treat in the hopes that he will be quiet while we record this. If we have, extra Duke noise, this might be recorded over a long period of time with many cuts. So there's that. The boys lost their first game this week. A lot of lessons to learn. Probably a good thing, honestly, to lose now. It's got to be better than losing in the state semifinals as your first game last year.
Yeah.
We're busy at work. This week, it seems that my boss decided that when I said I wanted to go to a 4-day work week, really I said 3, but she took it as 4. And she must have decided that I meant I wanted to work 4 10-hour days instead of 5 8s, which is not at all what my intentions were. But yeah, so we're going to have to address that coming up soon. Anyway, how's it going, Laura?
Well, it's fall, y'all. Flagstaff is finally in the 70s, and we are so happy. We've been spending lots of time outside this weekend, enjoying lots of beautiful weather. In other news, Keely has been using her buttons a ton more. If I haven't talked about it recently on this podcast, or if you don't know what I'm talking about, we are teaching our dog to use buttons to communicate. So Keely's new favorite, she has button combos now. Her favorite button combos are more outside and want, love you, which is like personally my favorite thing she always says right now. It's super cute.
That's exciting.
Super exciting. So what are we going to talk about today, Travis?
Well, this is an area of health and healthcare that I feel is very important and not very well known or discussed. Because I work with the elderly so much, I often have people report dizziness, falls, or they have strokes or other serious medical problems. And I often wonder how much of this is due to the amount of medications they're on. Some of my patients are on 30 medications.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's crazy. I know this because when I do a start of care, which is basically when the physical therapist is the first person in the home, we have to go through their entire med list and all of this stuff. So when I see the 30, I cringe, but very few of my patients are on less than 5, which is the common definition of polypharmacy that even Medicare asks about in my start of cares now.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't work with this population. So that is, when you just said 30, I was like, excuse me, what?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, 30 is brutal to enter into the computer too.
Well, I can imagine.
The start of care. Yeah, it takes, it's probably 3 minutes per. So it'll literally take me almost an hour and a half just to enter their medications into the start of care. And then you have the rest of the crazy amount of paperwork.
Good grief.
Not my favorite visits in general. Anyway, so we're going to go over the research that talks about polypharmacy and just medications in the U.S. healthcare system in general, and looks at the side effects. It's surprising and almost shocking how the negative consequences of pharmaceuticals in this country. So
our first couple studies talk about polypharmacy and falls. So a lot of research has been suggesting that medications such as cardiovascular agents, central nervous system drugs, analgesics, and endocrine drugs increase the risk of falls. And the possible underlying mechanics for increased risk of falls that are related to the use of these medications are related to the adverse effects, such as dizziness, imbalance, or mobility difficulties, reduced attention, and vigilance. So the first study that we looked at examined the effect of polypharmacy on hospitalization due to a fall, included 6,220 participants, ages 50 and over, with data collected between 2012 to 2018. So they looked at varying levels of polypharmacy, all the way from no medications at all to 1 to 4 medications, 5 to 9 medications, which is polypharmacy, 5 and up, and then 10 plus medications, which is heightened polypharmacy, or that's what they defined it as.
I'd like to add a fifth group of 30
Sure.
plus.
Yeah,
we'll call that insane polypharmacy.
Insane polypharmacy. Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. Maybe that's why I was like, oh my gosh, people take 30, because in this study it just said 10 plus, and I was like, oh, 10 must be a lot. That seems like a lot already, but 30
is a lot.
Anyway. So they found that the prevalence of people admitted to the hospital due to a fall increased steadily according to their polypharmacy status, which the graph was like a very nice visual for somebody who is like me and likes to see things laid out like that. But if you want to hear the numbers, it was 1.5% in people reporting no medications, 4.7% of falls among people reporting 1 to 4 medications. So even not polypharmacy, like 1 to 4 medications, you saw an increase there from no medications at all.
And just to be clear, this is like 4.7% of the reasons that these people that are taking 1 to 4 medications are going to the hospital is due to a fall. Is that, am I understanding that correctly? Perfect.
Yes.
Okay.
7.9% of falls occurred among people with polypharmacy. So that's the 5 to 9 medications. And then 14.8% among those reporting heightened polypharmacy. So that's the 10 plus, which I guess would include your 30, but it's probably way higher for your 30.
We're just guess that it's 20% or more.
Right, exactly. So like that's science. A huge steady increase for.
So the difference between no medications and 10 plus medications is literally tenfold.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah,
that's a crazy difference. Yeah, and one of the reasons that people are probably not aware of this, one of the reasons that falls are so important is because if you fall and break your hip, studies show between your 1-year mortality after breaking your hip, which is a very common injury in elderly patients, partially because of osteoporosis being such a big thing, but 1 in 3 adults age 50 and over dies within 12 months of suffering a hip fracture. Now, studies basically have shown from 14%, which would be about 1 in 6, to 58%. Yeah, so it's a huge mortality factor.
Wow.
So
anything
that's why this is so important.
Right, because prescriptions are modifiable. Like you can do things to hopefully not take this many medications. Match things. Or a lot of my patients get on a medication, and then they get on a medication because of the side effects of that medication, and then another one for the side effects of that medication, and then you end up with 30. And we'll go over this later, but the problem is that people don't look at that. People, when I say people in this context, I'm saying healthcare professionals aren't looking at that and saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't be on this many medications, and we should take a look and see if we can get off some. Right. I've also had recently, I've noticed that people that have had high blood pressure for decades, a lot of times, especially men, it's very common in your 20s and 30s. If you're just slightly unhealthy to have high blood pressure. And
they've been on blood pressure medications for decades to bring their blood pressure down, and then suddenly they're getting low blood pressure.
Oh,
And then they're
wow.
having falls, because if you have low blood pressure, as you know, you'll get extreme dizziness. You can pass out easily. A lot of times it happens when you go from lying down to sitting, or sitting to standing. Sitting to standing is a very bad time for you to get really dizzy and need to pass out. And it's because your body can't regulate your blood pressure that well. So if you are on high blood pressure pills at any age, I would highly recommend you are monitoring your blood pressure, because you do not want it to go low if your body adapts for some reason. Low blood pressure is not that much better than high blood pressure.
Right.
So I have another study here that looked at drugs and falls again. The fall risk increasing drugs. They're specifically looking at specific drugs that mostly have, side effects of dizziness and things like that, and are associated with higher levels of falls. Antihypertensives is one. So I just kind of covered that one. Diuretics is another one. Beta blockers, which is another antihypertensive. Sedatives and hypnotics, neuroleptics, antipsychotics, antidepressants, benzodiazepines, narcotics, and NSAIDs. NSAIDs is like ibuprofen. Most of these are some sort of psychological prescription. Antidepressants, antipsychotics, obviously. Benzos is usually to treat either alcoholism or I think they use that in depression as well. I'm not a pharmacy expert, so.
Me neither.
So basically, they made a note in this study that said drug prescriptions for older patients require close attention, particularly since drug metabolism, efficacy, and other things vary significantly between older and younger individuals. Since drugs are a modifiable risk factor, which you said, periodic drug review among older adults should be incorporated into a fall prevention program. And programs to prevent falls and fractures should be implemented to reduce the associated injury, mortality costs, and substantial burden on healthcare workers and institutions. Physical therapy works very well for falls. I know this firsthand. I don't know. Am I firsthand or secondhand?
I guess secondhand.
Am I secondhand?
I don't know, because you're not the person falling.
I'm involved.
You're very closely, directly involved in this.
That's right. I'm very closely involved in helping people stop falling. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Yes. And as I was telling you, Travis, like before we started this episode, my grandma, who is almost 92, has been recently falling more often, and they just decided to send her to physical therapy. And I don't think I've ever been happier. That was the only thing they decided to do when she went to the doctor, was send her to physical therapy. And I was like, I could cry with happiness right now.
That's awesome. I'm glad that they are taking care of her, and I hope she gets a physical therapist that is like knowledgeable about falls. Yeah. Yeah. If you need help finding one in her area, let me know. Maybe I can help her out.
That would be great. Thanks, Travis. Yeah. Anyway, so our next article was basically about new prescription drugs and just adverse events that are associated with new prescription drugs. So this article looked at answering the question, are novel therapeutics associated with post-market safety events? It looked at all novel therapeutics between the years of 2001 and 2010. Post-market events are notified to the public in several ways. So withdrawals occur when new safety information profoundly changes the balance of risks and benefits associated with the drug, prompting the drug maker or the FDA to withdraw the product from the market. You'll sometimes see boxed warnings, which highlight important safety factor or safety risks on top of the drug's label, which are issued by the FDA when a major, often life-threatening safety risk is detected, yet the overall risk-benefit profile favors continued market availability. And then thirdly, you'll see the FDA releases safety communications, often accompanied by labeling revisions to alert clinicians to pertinent but non-life-threatening safety risks. Anyway, all that being said, they found among 222 novel therapeutics approved by the FDA from 2001 through 2010, 32% were affected by a post-market safety event. Biologics, psychiatric therapeutics, and accelerated and near regulatory deadline approvals, so things that were approved more quickly, were statistically significantly associated with higher rates of events.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's like a third. I mean, 32%. That's basically a third.
That's a lot.
The novel therapeutics.
Yeah.
Having some sort of
Negative.
Post-market safety event.
Uh-huh.
That's very scary because that's pretty much completely preventable.
Mm-hmm.
This next one is actually, they looked at several studies. It is not a study in itself. This is an article on the Harvard Center for Ethics page. It is titled, this is a great title. It is titled New Prescription Drugs, a Major Health Risk with Few Offsetting Advantages.
Oof.
Yeah, so their research indicated that new prescription drugs have a 1 in 5 chance of causing serious reactions after approval. These are US drugs, obviously. They also looked at systematic reviews across Europe and the US that indicate that in hospital charting, they indicate that properly prescribed and taken drugs cause 1.9 million hospitalizations per year, another 840,000 serious adverse reactions each year in hospitalized patients, and 128,000 deaths, which would make prescription drugs the 4th leading cause of death in the US, right there with strokes.
Holy cow.
Yes, that's a lot of deaths. So the European Union estimates similar numbers in Europe with 200,000 deaths each year from their prescription drugs.
Oh,
so
wow.
They're not any better than us. I did look up the difference in population. European Union is about a third higher population than us. So based on the 200,000 to the 128,000, we're actually doing slightly better than them. I guess there's a bright side to that. So in this article, the Harvard Ethics Committee asked, is this the price of progress with the benefits far outweighing the costs? And long story short, they figured out, no, it's not. So basically what they found is that new drugs rarely offer significant improvements over old drugs with well-established risks. In other words, the old drugs do the same thing usually, but we know what's going to happen side effects wise, adverse events wise.
I see.
Yeah. Independent reviews from Canada, the Netherlands, and France have indicated that of nearly 1,000 new drugs from 2002 to 2011 approved in Western civilizations across the world, only 8% were clinically superior to prior drugs that had been approved for a long time. These old generic drugs that are very cheap.
Dang.
So they go on. I think the most obvious reason for these new drugs still being approved when they are not clinically superior is that there is a huge financial incentive. I'm not going to go into that too much, but they go on to talk about the financial incentives for pharmaceutical companies to formulate new drugs. And we will link to that in the show notes if anyone is interested in reading more about that from Harvard.
So these next couple of studies go over basically polypharmacy and its association with mortality. So there was a 2017 systematic review and meta-analysis, again, the gold standard of your research. This is the highest level of evidence, summarizing existing literature concerning the association between polypharmacy and mortality. They included 47 studies in this review, and found that polypharmacy is associated with increased mortality risk. And again, if you're looking at something as big as a systematic review and a meta-analysis, they usually come up not concluding anything. So when they conclude something, it's a pretty strong association. The causality of this relationship, they reported, remains unclear, but it again emphasizes the need for approaches to healthcare delivery that achieve optimal balance of risk and benefit in medicine prescribing.
Yeah, so when they say the causality of this relationship remains unclear, basically they're saying, hey, is this chicken or the egg? Are the medications killing these people, or are they on so many medications because they have all of these comorbidities that we know increase risk factors for death, obesity, depression, anxiety, loneliness. We've talked about a lot of them,
Right.
Cancer, stroke, all that stuff. Here's the great thing. The next study is a 2020 study titled Polypharmacy, Hospitalization and Mortality Risk, a nationwide cohort study. And they looked at those things. So they looked at,
awesome.
Yes. So we'll get to it in a second, but this study included 3,007,620 individuals aged 65 plus with at least one prescribed medication and no hospitalizations in the last year. That's an important part because if you didn't have a hospitalization in the last year, you're not near as likely to have a hospitalization coming up. The median age of these patients was 72. In general, 46.6% of these patients experience polypharmacy, again, defined as greater than 5 medications per day, 5 prescription medications in this one. So Medicare, actually, when I do my start of cares, they define that as prescription or over-the-counter medications.
Oh, okay.
This is specifically looking at least 5 prescription medications. So they examined hospitalizations and all cause of death associated with number of prescriptions. Median follow-up for these patients was 5 years. They found that an increasing number of prescribed meds was associated with increased risk of both hospitalization and mortality. And this was consistent against subgroups of age, sex, residential area, and comorbidities. So they accounted for that person that has had a stroke and is morbidly obese and all of that, and still found that patient taking more than 5 prescriptions was much more likely to end up in the hospital or to pass than somebody in the same health condition that wasn't taking more than 5 prescriptions. So overall, they found that polypharmacy versus not experiencing polypharmacy was 18% higher chance of hospitalization and a 25% increased risk of death. This is quite disturbing considering they found that almost 50% of the population over 65 that had not been in the hospital in the last year was on more than 5 prescription medications.
Dang, that's scary.
So Lauren, what can people do? I mean, there's the obvious: exercise, diet, control your weight, control what you can control, improve your overall health. What else can people do? Say your grandma is on 10 prescription medications. What steps can you take?
As my grandma or as my grandma's granddaughter?
As your grandma or as your grandma's advocate?
I would recommend her to talk to her physician to review her meds regularly and monitor the side effects and change her meds if needed and if possible to decrease risk of all of these things: falls, mortality, everything we talked about.
Yeah, so there's an infographic from the CDC, I think infographics the right word. It's a PDF page that is on their website. They recommend that physicians review meds regularly with patients, monitor the side effects, and change meds to decrease fall risk. Now, and I say this because I'm in healthcare and I see this crap all the time. If you go to your physician and they're like, no, you need all these medications, and they're not monitoring the side effects and stuff like that, it's time to get a new physician. Yeah. And just in general, I don't know if I've said this in the podcast before, but there was a quote that I heard maybe a year ago that really stuck out to me and like explained the whole world of professionalism way better than I had ever had it explained. It said, in any profession, 1 out of 2 is in the bottom half of the profession. And I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. And it's true. Like there's bad physicians. There's bad physical therapists. There's bad chiropractors. There's bad teachers. You want to be with a good one.
Yes.
So if yours is not open to trying to help you improve your health in any way or get off these medications if you possibly can, you need to go find a different physician.
Right. If you're not feeling seen or heard or validated when you're going in to see your doctor who is in charge of your health, I take that back. They're not in charge of your health. You're in charge of your health. So if you're not feeling seen, heard, or validated, bye, Felicia.
Absolutely. Felicia. Lauren, do you have anything else to add?
I don't think so.
I don't think I have a
shocking statistics. No,
I don't think I really have a challenge this week. If you're interested in this stuff, just, click on the links in the podcast episode or the YouTube video or something and check it out. I swear we're not lying about any of it. It's pretty insane.
Pretty
honestly.
Insane, pretty grim. I guess the challenge would be if you're like me and have a grandma who has fallen recently, check in on her and like talk about medications or things like that. Like my grandma's like barely on any medications, which she's amazing and rare, but keeping an eye on, I know my grandparents on my mom's side are seriously like mind-blowing.
You also told me your grandma's having fall problems at 92, which means she was too stubborn to fall for the last 91 years.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time she's like even fallen at all. And like, I don't know, they are amazing, but they do everything they should be doing. They're incredible. But anyway, your challenge is check up on your grandparents or even your parents and make sure and try. Have those conversations with them.
Share this with them to try and educate them if they are on 10 prescriptions or 30.
Hope they're not on 30.
God, I hope not, but it's more common than you think.
Dang.
Yeah. Anyway, well, this was fun. We'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to listen to this episode of the Health and Happiness Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode and are getting benefits from our content.
If your life is improving in part due to the information in this podcast, we would greatly appreciate you sharing the episode with your family and friends on social media and leaving us a review so we can continue to reach more people and improve the health and happiness of the community at large.
Thanks again, and we will see you next week for another episode of the Health and Happiness Podcast.